My name is Douglas Harrison, and I'm a 64-year-old retired civil engineer. 3 years ago, I lost my wife, Catherine, to cancer, leaving me with our daughter, Emma, who's now 28 and thriving as a marine biologist in Vancouver. After Catherine's passing, I poured my energy into volunteering and staying close to my mom. She had been my unwavering support through my grief. My brother Glenn is 4 years my junior, 58 years old. We shared a typical childhood, playing hockey in the driveway of our old North York home. However, as adults, our paths diverged significantly. Glenn ventured into real estate, married Patricia, and they had 2 children. While they presented a picture of success, I couldn't help but notice Glenn's constant pursuit of the next big deal, often leading him to be financially overextended. There were quiet whispers during family gatherings about failed investments and Patricia working exhausting double shifts as a nurse just to keep their heads above water. My mother, Helen Harrison, was 85 and had always possessed an incredibly sharp mind. A retired school teacher, she could effortlessly recite poetry and consistently win at Scrabble. She lived independently in her Richmond Hill home until about 9 months prior, when Glenn convinced her that she needed additional assistance. He suggested he become her power of attorney, ostensibly to manage her bills and medical appointments. Mom was initially hesitant, but Glenn, being her baby boy, was incredibly persuasive. That's when everything took a dramatic turn. Within weeks of Glenn securing the power of attorney, Mom was abruptly diagnosed with severe dementia. Glenn promptly moved her into Maple Grove Care Center, insisting she could no longer live alone. When I visited her there, I was absolutely stunned. My once vibrant, witty mother sat in a chair, her gaze vacant. She didn't recognize me. Her speech was minimal, confused, and fragmented. "Is this truly possible?" I remembered asking her doctor, Dr. James Whitmore. "She was perfectly fine just 2 months ago." He responded smoothly. "Dementia can indeed progress very rapidly in some cases. The cognitive decline in patients her age can be quite sudden." But his explanation simply didn't sit right with me. Regardless, I continued to visit Mom 3 times a week. Even when she seemed not to know who I was, I'd hold her hand, share updates about Emma, and talk about my volunteer projects. Glenn also visited, but his visits were far less frequent, and he always appeared rushed, constantly checking his watch. As I stood in my kitchen, Glenn's chilling words still echoing in my ears, the realization hit me with overwhelming force. This wasn't sorrow I was feeling. This was pure, unadulterated greed. I immediately called Maple Grove Care Center. "I'm calling about my mother, Helen Harrison," I stated when someone finally answered. "I just heard she passed away last night." There was a brief, unsettling pause. "I'm sorry, Mr. Harrison, but I don't have any record of that. Let me check her room." My heart began to pound uncontrollably. A few minutes later, the nurse returned to the line. "Sir, your mother is fine. She's having breakfast right now. Is there some confusion?" I sank heavily into a chair. "Can you do me a favor?" I requested, trying to keep my voice steady. "Don't tell anyone I called, especially not my brother." I hung up and instantly dialed my daughter. Emma answered on the 3rd ring, her voice laced with worry. "Dad, it's barely 7 o'clock in the morning there. What's wrong?" "Your uncle just told me Grandma died." "But she didn't," I explained, my voice tight with urgency. "She's alive. Emma, I think Glenn is trying to steal her estate." Silence hung in the air. Then Emma's voice, now sharp with anger, came through. "Dad, that's elder abuse. That's fraud. What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet," I admitted. but I need to figure this out fast. He said the funeral is Friday. That's only 3 days from now. After my conversation with Emma, I spent the entire morning making calls. My first call was to Robert Chen, a lawyer I had worked with previously on a construction contract dispute. I laid out the entire bizarre situation to him. "Douglas, this is serious," Robert stated grimly. "If your brother has power of attorney and is misrepresenting your mother's condition or misappropriating her assets, we're talking about criminal charges. But you need evidence. Solid evidence." Next, I hired Sarah Mitchell, a private investigator. She arrived at my house that very afternoon, a sharp woman in her mid-40s with striking gray streaks in her dark hair. "How long has your brother had POA?" she asked, making meticulous notes. "9 months, I replied, right after Mom supposedly developed dementia.
And before that, my mother was completely competent. She was volunteering at the library, playing bridge twice a week. Then suddenly, she couldn't remember her own name. Sarah nodded, her expression serious. "I've seen cases like this. Give me 48 hours. I'll find out what's happening with your mother's finances." That evening, I drove to Maple Grove without announcing my visit. When I reached Mom's room, she was sitting in her usual chair by the window, gazing out at the darkening sky. Her gray hair was thinner now, and her face more lined than I remembered. But tonight, something about her seemed different, less drugged, more present. "Mom," I said softly, pulling up a chair beside her. She turned slowly, her familiar brown eyes meeting mine. There was something in them, recognition, or was I just imagining it? "It's me, Douglas, your son." She blinked, her mouth working as if she wanted to speak, but then a nurse entered to check her vitals, and the moment vanished. I drove home through the falling snow, my mind racing. What exactly was Glenn planning? A fake funeral to convince everyone Mom was dead? And then what? Transfer all her assets while everyone believed she was gone? It was insane. Yet, I was also realizing potentially brilliant in its sheer audacity. Sarah called me first thing the next morning. "Douglas, you need to sit down." I sat at my kitchen table, pressing the phone to my ear. "Your brother has been very busy. In the past 8 months, he's transferred approximately $280,000 from your mother's accounts into his own. He sold her cottage in Muskoka to a numbered company, which I'm still tracing, but I strongly suspect he's behind it. He's also been drawing heavily on her credit cards. And Douglas, the doctor who diagnosed your mother's dementia, Dr. James Whitmore, he went to university with your brother. They've been friends for 30 years. A wave of nausea washed over me. So, Mom's dementia could be medication-induced. If she was being overprescribed sedatives or antipsychotics, it would perfectly explain the sudden cognitive decline and her vacant behavior. "That's attempted murder," I gasped. That's what we need to prove." Sarah's voice was calm but firm. "I'm getting copies of her medical records, but that takes time. In the meantime, I'd strongly suggest you visit your mother again and document everything. Record conversations with your brother if you can. Ontario is a one-party consent province." That afternoon, I was back at Maple Grove. I had my phone ready to record anything suspicious, but when I arrived at Mom's room, it was empty. A nurse I didn't recognize was changing the sheets. "Where's my mother?" I asked, panic beginning to rise in my chest. "Oh, Mr. Harrison," she replied, "your brother took her out for a drive. He said she needed some air." My blood ran cold. "When?" "About an hour ago." I ran to the parking lot, but Glenn's black Mercedes was already gone. I tried calling him repeatedly. No answer. I called 5 times. Nothing. Finally, 3 hours later, they returned. Glenn helped Mom out of the car, supporting her as she shuffled back to her room. She looked utterly exhausted, confused. Glenn spotted me waiting in the hallway. "Douglas," he said, not even bothering to conceal his annoyance. "What are you doing here?" "You said Mom died yesterday," I retorted. "Yet here she is." He had the sheer audacity to laugh. "Oh, that. Yeah. Sorry about the confusion. I meant to call you back. False alarm. Mom had a bad episode yesterday, and I thought, well, these things happen with dementia." "Where did you take her today?" I pressed. "Just for a drive. She likes getting out." "Really? Because she looks like she can barely stand." "Back off, Douglas." His voice dropped, becoming harder, colder. "I'm her power of attorney. I make the decisions about her care, not you. You want to challenge that? Get a lawyer." He brushed past me, guiding Mom into her room. Through the doorway, I watched him settle her into her chair, speaking to her in a low voice I couldn't hear. Then he left, not even glancing at me as he walked away. I was about to leave myself when my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something compelled me to answer. "Hello?" Silence. Then a faint, scratchy whisper. A woman's voice. "Douglas." "Yes? Who is this?" "Douglas, it's me." The voice was so quiet I had to press the phone hard against my ear. "Who?" "It's your mother." I froze. That couldn't be right. Mom was just in her room, and this call was coming from... I checked the screen. A blocked number. "Douglas, listen carefully. I don't have much time. I need you to come to my room tonight. Late. After 10 o'clock. Make sure Glenn isn't here. And Douglas, don't tell anyone about this call." The line went dead. I stood in the parking lot, snow falling around me, staring at my phone as if it had transformed into something alien. It was impossible. Mom couldn't have called me. She could barely string 2 words together. And yet, that voice, even whispered and strained, had sounded like her, the real her, the sharp, clear-minded woman I'd known my entire life. I waited in my car until after 10 p.m., watching the nursing home. Glenn's Mercedes had long since departed. The night shift was on, just a skeleton crew. I used my key code to enter through the side door and made my way silently to Mom's room. She was sitting up in bed, the lights low. When I entered, she turned to look at me, and in the dim light, I saw her eyes, clear, focused, completely lucid. "Close the door," she said in a normal voice, not the confused mumble I'd heard for months, a normal, strong voice. I shut the door, my hands trembling. "Mom, what?" "Sit down, sweetheart. We need to talk, and we don't have much time." I sat down, completely stunned. Are you okay? What's happening?" My mother, who I'd believed was lost in the fog of dementia, smiled at me. An actual smile, with that wry expression I remembered from childhood, when she'd caught Glenn and me sneaking cookies before dinner. "I'm fine, Douglas," she said calmly. "I've been fine this whole time." "But the dementia, the diagnosis, you couldn't even recognize me," I stammered. "Because I was pretending." The room seemed to tilt around me. "Pretending?" She reached over and took my hand. Her grip was firm, steady.
Nothing like the weak, trembling hands I'd held for months. Douglas, I'm 85 years old. I've been thinking a lot about mortality, about what happens when I'm gone, and I realized I needed to know something. I needed to know which of my sons would actually take care of me. Not for my money, not for inheritance, but because they loved me. So, you faked dementia to test us? I asked, still trying to process it.
When Glenn suggested becoming my power of attorney, I saw an opportunity, she explained. I agreed, but I also consulted my own lawyer, someone Glenn doesn't know about. I put most of my assets in an irrevocable trust weeks before Glenn even got the POA. The accounts he has access to, I only left enough in them to see what he'd do. I couldn't comprehend this level of foresight. Mom, why didn't you tell me? Her eyes grew sad. Because I had to test both of you. I had to see who would visit me when I couldn't give them anything back, who would hold my hand even when I didn't know their name. And Douglas, you came 3 times a week. You sat with me, you talked to me, even when I acted like I had no idea who you were. Tears began to stream down my face. Now, of course, I came. You're my mother. I know that now. But Glenn, she shook her head. Glenn failed, Douglas. Worse than I ever imagined. I've been documenting everything. Every time he came to pressure me to sign papers. Every time he got angry when I played confused. Every time he took something from this room, thinking I wouldn't notice. I have it all recorded. The $280,000? He took it from the accounts I left accessible. I've been letting him dig his own grave. Mom, he told me you were dead. He's planning a funeral for Friday, I exclaimed, my voice filled with fresh horror. She nodded calmly. I know. He told me today during our drive. He said I was going to have an accident, that I'd pass away peacefully. He wanted me to agree to sign papers first, transferring everything, but I refused, playing confused. He's running out of time, and he knows it. This is insane. This is dangerous. We need to call the police right now, I urged. No, not yet, she said, holding my gaze. Robert Chen, your lawyer, he's been my lawyer too for the past month. We have a plan, but I need you to trust me, Douglas. Can you do that? I squeezed her hand. Always. Over the next 2 days, we meticulously set everything up. Robert quietly brought in the police, and they agreed to let Mom's plan play out, aiming to catch Glenn in the act with irrefutable evidence. We installed tiny hidden cameras, the size of buttons, in Mom's room. We coordinated with the nursing home staff we could trust, and Mom, with incredible resolve, continued her act, playing the confused, declining patient whenever Glenn was around. Glenn visited twice more. Once, he brought papers for Mom to sign, transfer documents for her house. Mom scribbled something illegible, pretending not to understand. Glenn's frustration was palpable, barely contained. Just sign clearly, Mom, he said through gritted teeth. I'm trying to help you. The second time, on Thursday night, he brought a syringe. I watched the video footage later, and it made me physically ill. He told Mom it was her medication, but we had it tested later. It was a massive dose of sedatives, enough to sedate a horse. Mom pretended to take it, but skillfully palmed the pills. Tomorrow, Glenn said, smoothing her hair. Tomorrow you'll finally be at peace, Mom. No more suffering. Friday morning arrived. Glenn had booked the Thornhill funeral home. He had sent out notices, called relatives. Cousins I hadn't seen in years called me, offering condolences. I played along, confirming the funeral was at 2 p.m. and that it was very sudden. The funeral home was packed.
Glenn had spared no expense. Flowers everywhere, a large photo of Mom from 20 years ago at the front of the room. He had even written an obituary full of flowery language about a beloved mother and after a long illness. I sat in the front row with Emma, who had flown in that morning. Glenn sat across the aisle with Patricia and their kids. His face was composed, appropriately sorrowful. Patricia kept touching his arm, comforting him. His children looked genuinely sad. They had loved their grandmother. At exactly 2 p.m., Glenn stood up to deliver the eulogy. He walked to the podium, adjusted the microphone, and began to speak. We're here today to celebrate the life of Helen Margaret Harrison, born February 14th, 1939. Passed away January 7th, 2025. Mom was an incredible woman, a teacher who shaped young minds for 35 years, a mother who always put her children first. And in her final months, she trusted me to care for her. She knew I would protect her interests, manage her affairs, and ensure she was comfortable. He paused, his voice catching with an emotion I now knew was completely false. Mom always loved me best, he continued. She told me so many. I stood up, and every head in the room turned toward me. That's interesting, Glenn, I said loudly, my voice cutting through the solemn atmosphere. Want to tell everyone where Mom really is right now? Confusion rippled through the room. Glenn's face went white. Douglas, sit down. This isn't the time. Where's the body, Glenn? I pressed. Where's Mom's body? She's being cremated. We discussed this, he stammered. Really? Because I called the crematorium. They don't have... Glenn's daughter burst into tears. Mom made her way deliberately down the aisle. When she reached Glenn, she stopped. Hello, son, she said clearly, her voice strong. I'm not dead, but your inheritance is. Glenn's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Mom, you're confused. You're sick. This is a mistake. I'm not confused, Glenn, she stated, her voice unwavering. I've been recording everything for the past 8 months. Every threat, every theft, every time you tried to get me to sign documents transferring my assets to you, every time you drugged me to keep me compliant. She then turned to face the assembled crowd. Many of them were crying now, some in relief, others in utter shock. I'm sorry for deceiving all of you, Mom said, her voice filled with a profound sadness. But I had to know the truth. I had to see what my son would do when he thought I was helpless. And what I found broke my heart. One of the officers stepped forward. Glenn Harrison, you're under arrest for elder abuse, theft over $5,000, fraud, and attempted probate fraud. You have the right to remain silent. Glenn, we had video footage of him trying to force her to sign. The College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario was understandably not lenient with a doctor who knowingly prescribed dangerous medications to an elderly patient at the behest of her power of attorney without proper evaluation. As for Mom, she decided to move into a small condo conveniently located near my house. She was done with the large house, done with the responsibilities of property maintenance. She wanted to be close to family, to Emma whenever she visited, and to me. We now have dinner together twice a week. She even started volunteering again, this time at an elder abuse prevention center, where she bravely shares her story to help others recognize the warning signs. With part of the money Glenn had returned, we established the Helen Harrison Elder Protection Fund. This fund provides crucial legal assistance to seniors fighting financial abuse cases and finances educational programs about the immense responsibilities that come with a power of attorney. One evening, about a year after everything had unfolded, Mom and I sat on my back porch, watching another Toronto snowfall. She held a mug of tea, wrapped comfortably in a thick blanket. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked her, breaking the comfortable silence. "The way you tested us?" She was quiet for a long time, gazing out at the falling snow. "I regret that it was necessary," she finally said. "I regret that my own son could do what he did. But Douglas, I don't regret finding out the truth. I had to know who would love me when I had nothing to give. You gave me everything that mattered," I told her, my voice thick with emotion. "You taught me integrity. You taught me that doing the right thing matters even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." She smiled, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "And that's why you passed the test. Not because you visited me, though that mattered deeply, but because even when you thought I was gone, even when you thought you were getting nothing, you fought for what was right. You didn't let Glenn get away with it. You protected me, even when I couldn't protect myself. That's what family does. Real family, yes, but blood doesn't make you family, Douglas. Love does. Choice does. Showing up does. Glenn was my blood, but he stopped being family the moment he decided I was just an asset to liquidate." We sat in comfortable silence, watching the snow pile up on the fence and the bare trees. Inside, I could hear my phone buzzing. Emma, probably calling from Vancouver for our weekly check-in. Or perhaps Mom's lawyer with updates on the charitable fund. Life was moving forward. Mom looked at me again, her eyes still sharp and clear. "You know what the saddest part is?" "What?" I asked. "If Glenn had just asked," she murmured, her voice laced with an enduring sorrow. "If he'd just been honest about his financial problems, I would have helped him. Not with everything, not enabling poor choices, but I would have helped. Instead, he chose to steal. He chose to treat me like I was already dead. And that choice cost him everything." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just held her hand. This remarkable woman had taught me more about strength and dignity in the past year than in all the years before. She had survived betrayal by her own son, orchestrated her own rescue, and emerged determined to help others. That's the thing about family, the real kind. It's not about blood. It's not about inheritance. It's about showing up. It's about loving someone, even when they can't give you anything back. It's about fighting for what's right, even when it means standing against your own brother. Glenn made his choices. He chose greed over love. He chose theft over integrity. And he's paying the price, not just in prison time, but in the loss of his children's respect, his wife, his career, and his mother's love. As for me, I got something far more valuable than any inheritance. I got more years with my mother, real years, where we could talk and laugh and heal. I got the knowledge that when tested, I did the right thing. And I got the chance to be part of something bigger, helping other families avoid what we went through. Blood doesn't excuse betrayal. True family protects the vulnerable. And sometimes, the bravest thing an 85-year-old woman can do is pretend to be helpless just to find out who will help her when she can't help herself. That's what I learned from Helen Harrison, my mother, my hero, the woman who taught me that dignity matters more than dollars, and that real love shows up even when there's nothing to gain.